want to welcome you to Called to Be. This is our first edition, a monthly podcast that's going to come out specifically to parents, because if you're watching this, you've been called to be a parent. I'm Pastor Justin Krupski from Trinity Lutheran Church in Utica, Michigan. It's not just going to be me through these episodes, through these Called to Be podcasts. I'll bring other parents in, other experts in the field. But today is just me and it's just you. And so let's receive some truth here about being called to be a parent and what that means. There's a Bible verse I want to share with you. It comes from Ephesians chapter 4. The Apostle Paul says, I want to urge you, I'm pleading you, I am exhorting you with you, I'm calling you out. I'm calling you out to live a life worthy, tip the scales of the calling that you have been called to. And yes, that calling is into a relationship with God, but very specifically, part of that calling is a calling as a parent. So you and I have been called to be parents. When I think about being called to be a parent as a disciple of Jesus, I do think this, and I see this in the Gospels, that we are called to entrust our kids to Jesus. And I think specifically, right, there's power in prayer. And so don't ever forget that, right? There's power in us praying for our kids. We're also called to not just entrust our kids to Jesus, but to expose our kids to Jesus, His means of grace, His word, His truth. And we do that certainly in baptism. We do that by sending them to Sunday school, VBS, Christian schools, right? We do that. We expose them to Jesus, bringing them to church, right? His word, bringing that word into our life. And we also just don't expose and entrust. We set the example. We got to live by example because our kids are watching us, and faith is not taught, it is caught. And so we're called to be, and today in this edition, I want to talk about this specific trait that we teach here in our ministries at Trinity to the next generation, but not just the next generation, to all of us, that we are called to be respectful. We're called to be respectful. Yes, in our relationship with God, we're called to honor Him, but we're called to honor one another. If you go into the scriptures, you see honoring God, honoring one another shows up over 300 times. This is a big deal. And specifically when I think about respecting others, Philippians says that we need to value others above ourselves. And so to respect is to speak and to give value to others. To others, that's what it means to respect. And so parents, let's talk specifically about how we teach our kids how to respect others. Yes, we could talk about respecting God, but let's talk about respecting others, because as we respect others, we're actually respecting God. And so there's a parenting Bible verse that I love, and I know I've been sharing some scripture with you, but I can't help but do that, and that's what we're doing here. In 1 Thessalonians, the Apostle Paul speaks again about this calling, specifically the calling as parents. He uses it as an example to what he is doing to the church in Thessalonica. He says, you are witnesses, and God also, how holy and righteous and blameless was our conduct toward you. For you know how, like a father with his children, there's a parenting image. And so I lean in as a father, and I pray that we all lean in, whether we're a mom or a dad. But what are you talking about, Paul? God, what are you saying about how a parent teaches their kids, treats their kids? We exhorted each one of you. We exhorted each one of you. We encouraged each one of you. We cheered each one of you on, and we comforted you. We comforted you, and we just didn't cheer you on or comfort you. We actually charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God who calls you into His own kingdom and glory. And so when I hear that as a parent, I think of the 3 C's. I think what I'm called to do as a parent is not just entrust my kids to Jesus, set the example, and expose them to Jesus, but specifically, I'm called to cheer my kids on, cheer them on. I'm called to comfort them, and I'm called to charge them. Because Paul is saying, hey, this is a reality, this is a deep truth, and I love that, and I've tried to model this pattern, to bring this pattern into my parenting in a lot of different aspects. But let's bring it into respect. Respect. And so the opposite of respect is what? Disrespect. Disrespect. And so when it comes to cheering our kids on as parents, I think we need to give them a high five. We need to celebrate. We need to get excited when we see them respecting others, seeing value in others, treating others with that value that they have. Right? Parents, I think it's easy to criticize our kids, right? But we're called to cheer them on first and foremost. In sporting and other things, right? We're cheering them on. Let's cheer them on when it comes to respect. When we see them respecting others, when we see them saying thank you, when we see them giving family members a hug, when we see them making eye contact with others, when we see them respecting their stuff, or even respecting us by listening to us, right? Let's cheer them on. Let's get excited. And not just cheering them on, but when we see respect happening in the world, it is so good for us to say, hey, that was good. Did you see that? Did you see that? Right? That's part of cheering on, to celebrate when we see respect. And so what does respect look like? When you see it, cheer it on, parents. This is a big deal. We need to help implant that into our kids. And the best way to implant things is to celebrate it, to cheer it on when we see it, to speak out, to breathe out the positive. There's so many negative things happening all around, right? And so we need to see that positive. We need to cheer on our kids. So think about that. Apply it. So comforting when it comes to respect, I think of a couple different angles to come at that with if we're trying to teach our kids respect. The first one is when our kids are disrespected, right? When our kids are hurt from others, right? We need to comfort them. We need to comfort them, right? Because that's not the way it was supposed to be. We need to comfort them. When we disrespect them, parents, right? We need to apologize to them. That's part of comforting, reconcile that relationship with them. And no parent is perfect. And sometimes, right, even I, right, mess up as a parent and I get a little too heated. I get a little too negative. I cross the line with trying to teach them something. I exasperate them, right, and I disrespect them. And so part of comforting, right, is apologizing to them as a parent. Right? That's the reality when it comes to respect and disrespect. And another aspect of it is when our kids do disrespect others, when our kids do respect us, we need to comfort them by speaking forgiveness over them, right? That we forgive them, but also that God forgives them, right? That's part of comforting. Our kids know, and if you want to sit there and act like your kid's perfect, great. But our kids know that they're not perfect. And so the worst thing we can do as parents is act like their bad behavior isn't bad behavior, right? They need us to love on them with truth. And part of that, right, is to be able to call that out. But as we call it out, right, we need to be able to comfort them and tell them, hey, it's going to be all right. We're all learning, right? God loves you. I love you. We forgive you. All right, let's move on, right? Comforting. Think about that. Respect. Let's keep talking about respect. So Paul says, I want to charge you. I want to charge you to do this. And he actually says, look at my life, how I did things. And Paul wasn't perfect, right? He says that over and over again. But for us as parents, the charge, what Paul is saying, is follow my example. And so the best way to parent is by leading our kids by example. Because again, right, everything in life is better when it is caught and not taught, right? Our actions speak louder than our words. And so if we want kids who have respect, the question is, are we respecting others? Are our kids seeing us respect others? And how do we handle it when we disrespect others? Do we blame it on others, or do we make amends? Do we make sure we tell our kids, hey, what I did was wrong, right? But if we're charging our kids, right, we're leading by example, right? What does that look like? How do we talk about people in authority? Right? How do we talk in general? Right? Is it respectful? Right? How do we treat our family? Right? How do we talk about others? How do we talk about our enemies? Right? As Christians, right, Jesus said, you pray for those who persecute you. You pray for your enemies. You bless your enemies. Right? What are our kids being exposed to in us? Are they seeing respect? My one son is going through driver's training right now, has his permit, and so he's driving with me all the time, and he's driving. And what's interesting is he's really called me out on not using my blinker. I didn't even realize how much I don't use my blinker. And in fact, he's always looking at how fast I'm driving, right? So respect, right, actually has to do with authority a lot as well. And so do I respect the laws of the land, so to speak, and my neighbors by using my blinker? Right? I could say, hey, that's just ridiculous. Like, I don't need to drive this way, or I don't need to use my blinker all the time. Or I could actually say, oh man, thanks for call me out on that, and I'm going to do a better job and actually start using my blinker. I've actually used my blinker more in this past 2 weeks than I've used my blinker probably in the last 2 years. I'm sorry. Right? And I don't want to minimize that, and certainly I do use my blinker when there's a lot of traffic, and just hear me with that. But there's so many times where I don't use my blinker because it's like no one's behind me. Do I need to use my blinker? Well, when nobody's watching, how do we act? Right? Our kids are always watching, parents, and so we need to cheer our kids on when it comes to respect. We need to comfort our kids when it comes to disrespect. Right? And we need to charge our kids. We need to lead by example. And so parents, you're called to be. You're called to be a faithful parent. You're called to be a parent that teaches your kids how to respect, leading through your relationship with Jesus. And so we want to be here for you. We want to offer these podcasts as we go forward together, right? This month it's about respect. And so there's a lot of other resources here at Trinity to teach our kids how to respect. Pay attention to that. We did some sermons on it. We're doing a lot of different things. And so this month we're called to be respectful, and we're called to pass respect on to the next generation. Thanks for tuning in. Share this, subscribe to it, pass it along.